Most people think power comes from speaking, from being the loudest in the room. But real power, it's found in silence. It's found in the moments when you're not trying to win, you're trying to understand. Listening is not weakness, it's strategy, it's confidence, it's control. And the people who know how to listen are the people no one can manipulate. Today, I'm not here to teach you how to speak better. I'm here to show you why listening will take you further than talking ever could. Listening gives you information, and information gives you power. Most people walk into conversations trying to prove themselves, but the person who listens walks out with something far more valuable: knowledge. When you listen, you don't just hear words, you hear patterns, reactions, fears, desires. You start to understand why people do what they do, and that's the kind of insight that helps you make better decisions, solve problems faster, and lead with clarity. Think about this. The loudest person in the room reveals everything about themselves, but the quiet listener learns everything about everyone else. The talker exposes their thoughts, but the listener collects them. The talker says what's on their mind, but the listener understands what's on your mind. That's why listening is not passive, it's tactical. It's not just being polite, it's building perspective. When you listen with intention, you gather data, you read body language, tone changes, hesitation, confidence. You start recognizing what people are comfortable with and what they're hiding. Every pause tells a story. Every shift in energy opens a door. Listening is like reading the room with your ears. And the person who can read the room doesn't need to dominate it. They already control it. People think listening means being quiet, but listening means being aware, being fully present. It means resisting the urge to interrupt and choosing to understand before responding. When you do that, others feel valued. They feel safe. They start revealing more, trusting more, and doubting you less. That's when real influence begins, not when you demand attention, but when others willingly give it. Listening builds credibility because it shows maturity. It shows restraint. It shows strength. Anyone can talk over someone, but not everyone can control their impulse to speak. That restraint automatically sets you apart because it shows you're not desperate to be heard. Instead, you're patient enough to listen, and patience is the sibling of power. You'll notice how much more people open up to someone who listens. They drop their guard, their ego softens, their tone changes. They start telling stories they didn't plan to share, and the more they speak, the more you learn. You gain insight into how they think, and once you know how someone thinks, you can predict how they'll act. That's strategy. That's how listening quietly becomes the strongest move in the room. Listening is often mistaken for weakness, but weakness is talking without purpose. Weakness is reacting without thinking. Weakness is getting emotionally provoked and rushing to respond. Listening protects you from all of that. Listening lets you observe before committing. It teaches you timing, and timing is everything. You learn when to speak, when to wait, and when to walk away. You start noticing who's genuine and who's pretending, who's confident and who's compensating, who respects you and who just tolerates you. Most people reveal their intentions without realizing it, not through what they say, but through how they say it. When you listen closely, you can sense motives, you can sense pressure, you can sense when someone to impress you or manipulate you. That awareness is what protects you in friendships, relationships, business deals, arguments, and decisions. It keeps you from being blindsided because listening lets you see what people try to hide. There's another layer to listening to yourself. When you stop talking and start listening, you notice your own thoughts more clearly. You hear your doubts, your instincts, your intuition. You realize that sometimes your best answers already exist. You just never gave them space to speak. Silence is not empty. Silence is full of guidance. The problem is we often drown that guidance with noise, opinions, ego, stress, fear, distraction. But when you choose to listen, especially internally, clarity starts to surface, confidence grows. Anxiety lowers, you begin to act wiser, not louder. You start speaking less, but when you do speak, every word carries weight. That's because listening strengthens every word you say. It filters out the unnecessary and delivers only what matters. That's how people who listen end up being the people others listen to. In arguments, the person who listens always wins the advantage. While the other person rushes to defend their point, you're hearing their real weakness. You're listening to what triggers them. You're understanding what they care about the most. Maybe they want respect. Maybe they want validation. Maybe they just want to feel heard. Listening reveals the emotional fuel behind every reaction. And once you know what fuels someone, you can either calm it or control it. That's why lawyers, negotiators, leaders, and counselors are trained to listen. Not to agree, but to understand. Understanding doesn't mean you're on their side. It means you know how to navigate the situation more wisely. And when you navigate wisely, you don't need to dominate forcefully. That's how listening becomes a subtle power that most people overlook. If you've ever felt misunderstood, it's probably because someone didn't listen to you. If you've ever felt invisible, unheard, or dismissed, it affected you deeply. That's because listening is not just intellectual, it's emotional. It makes people feel seen. It makes them feel worthy, which means if you can master listening, you can master human connection. You'll have stronger relationships, better opportunities, and fewer conflicts. You'll know when to challenge someone and when to support them. You'll know when someone needs advice and when they just need silence. And the more you practice this, the more people will start respecting you, even if they don't fully understand why. They may not always remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel heard. That memory is what builds loyalty. That memory is what builds respect. And that memory is what gives you influence that talking alone could never achieve. That's why listening isn't just polite, it's powerful. It's why the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who observe, understand, and act with precision. They don't waste words because they don't need to. They let others speak first. They gather information, they control their reactions, they choose their words carefully. And that's exactly why when they finally speak, everyone listens. Silence doesn't mean absence. It means presence without pressure. When someone walks into a room and doesn't rush to talk, people notice. They begin to wonder who they are, what they think, and why they're so composed. That curiosity alone gives silent people presence before they even speak a word. Loud people often gain attention, but silent people gain respect. The difference is attention fades fast, but respect lasts. When you are loud, people may hear you. But when you are quiet and intentional, people listen to you. Loud voices demand space, but quiet confidence naturally earns it. It's the difference between trying to convince people you're important and letting them see it on their own. And when people see it on their own, it stays with them. That's why silence has weight. That's why silence is powerful. You don't need to push your presence into the room. Your calmness pulls the room toward you. When you don't talk too much, your words gain value. The less frequently you speak, the more carefully people listen when you do. They know you don't speak just to fill silence. They know you talk when you have something worth saying that alone makes you difficult to ignore. Silence also protects you because people can't use your words against you if you don't give them any. And in a world where opinions move faster than understanding, silence becomes a shield. It keeps you from saying things you regret. It stops you from reacting in anger or insecurity. Loud people reveal their weaknesses. Silent people protect theirs. In a conversation, the loud one usually loses control first because they build their power on reaction. But the silent one observes, gathers information, and only responds when the timing is right. That timing, that restraint, makes their voice stronger when they finally choose to use it. Have you noticed that people often talk more when someone listens quietly? They start revealing details they didn't intend to share. They start exposing their emotional state, their beliefs, their insecurities. Loud people try to impress, but around silent people, the loud ones end up exposing themselves. A quiet presence makes others feel the need to fill the silence, and when they fill it, they reveal things about themselves that you don't even have to ask. Silence is not emptiness, it's opportunity. Loud people argue to win. Silent people let the loud ones lose by themselves. That's not trickery, it's discipline, it's emotional control. It's knowing that power doesn't always show itself through noise. Sometimes power shows itself through the ability to stay calm when the room is not. Silence also creates mystery, and mystery creates value. When people don't know everything about you, they think more about you. They imagine stories, they guess your motives, they wonder what you're capable of. That's influence without effort. But if you talk too much, people don't guess anything about you. They already know. They know your fears. They know your plans. They know your limits. Loudness reveals. Silence conceals. And when people can't predict you, they respect you more cautiously. They don't challenge you as quickly. They don't argue as aggressively. They don't treat you casually. Because they don't know what you know, and that uncertainty works in your favor. You don't have to be silent all the time. You just have to use silence wisely. The key is speaking from control, not from impulse. Silence gives you space to think. It gives you time to understand the tone of the moment. It allows you to sense what's really going on beneath the surface. And when you speak after you've understood, your words carry a level of accuracy that loudspeakers can't match. Your responses become sharper. Your judgment, your presence becomes stronger. When someone speaks quickly, they often speak emotionally. But when you speak later, you speak logically. Loud people react. Silent people respond. Loud people fire without aiming. Silent people aim before firing. And that difference is what makes silent people harder to defeat. There's another thing people don't realize is silence makes room for confidence. When you don't try too hard to be understood, people assume you already know your value. Silence shows that you're not desperate to be heard. You're comfortable with who you are. You don't feel the need to defend yourself in every conversation. That calm self-assurance is hard to ignore. Loud people exhaust others. Silent people intrigue others. Loud people explain themselves. Silent people prove themselves through action. And action is always louder than words. When people notice you don't talk much, they start paying attention to what you do. And when your actions align with strength, integrity, or skill, silence becomes your amplifier. People start speaking positively about you even when you're not there. They start perceiving you as grounded, careful, wise, mature. That's not because you said it. It's because your silence made them observe it. In conflicts, silence is power. Not because it makes you passive, but because it keeps you composed. When someone expects you to react and you don't, they lose momentum, they lose control, they start questioning their own behavior. Silence forces people to face themselves. It exposes their aggression, their insecurity, their impatience. It makes space for their mistakes to surface clearly. Silence isn't running away, it's stepping back so you can see the whole picture. It's choosing clarity over ego. And sometimes silence wins arguments not by proving someone wrong, but by making them realize it themselves. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. In leadership, in relationships, in decision-making, the one who listens and speaks less is often the one people turn to for guidance. Why? Because silence creates trust. People feel safe sharing with someone who doesn't rush to judge or interrupt. Silent people gain loyalty because they make others feel seen and heard. They gain authority because they respond with thought, not impulse. And they gain respect because they don't try to dominate every moment of conversation. The loudest voice may start the conversation, but the quietest mind ends up shaping it. That's why silent people are taken more seriously than loud people. Their presence speaks without noise, their patience communicates strength, and their restraint builds credibility that words alone never could. Trust doesn't grow from impressive words. It grows from genuine listening. When someone feels heard, they feel understood, and when they feel understood, walls come down. They stop protecting themselves, they stop pretending, they stop performing. Listening creates a safe space, and in that space, people open up in ways they never would if you were just waiting for your turn to talk. Most conversations today are battles for attention, but real connection begins when there is no competition, only understanding. When you listen not to reply, but to truly absorb what someone is saying, you make them feel valued. You make them feel important. You make them feel like they matter. That feeling is what builds trust. That feeling is what people remember. And that feeling is what creates connections that last far longer than loud conversations and quick advice ever could. Think about the people you trust the most. They aren't always the ones with the best advice. They're the ones who actually listen to you. They don't rush to judge. They don't interrupt to make it about themselves. They don't try to fix everything immediately. They listen first. They understand before they respond. That's why you trust them, because they make you feel seen. Listening is emotional respect. It shows maturity. It shows empathy. It shows control. Not everyone can do it, especially in a world where everyone wants to talk, post, and prove themselves constantly. That's why listening has become rare. And anything rare becomes valuable. The ability to listen deeply is not just a skill. It's a silent strength that builds meaningful connections in friendships, families, relationships, and leadership. You don't have to agree with someone to understand them. You just have to listen long enough to see where they're coming from. And when people feel understood, they naturally open doors that talking alone could never unlock. Listening also gives you perspective. It lets you see the world through someone else's eyes. It helps you understand why they act a certain way, why they feel certain emotions, why they carry certain fears. When you understand their story, their behavior makes sense. And when their behavior makes sense, you respond with wisdom instead of frustration. That is how listening prevents conflict. That is how listening heals misunderstandings. You don't react blindly, you respond with clarity. Listening isn't just about words. It's about tone, tension, hesitation. It's about what isn't being said. Some people speak in feelings more than sentences. Some show their pain through silence. Some express their hopes through small hints. When you listen with attention, you catch those signals. You hear the hidden message. And when you understand what someone really needs, you connect on a deeper level than those who only hear the surface. Connections built through listening are stronger because they're built on truth, not assumptions. They're built on reality, not ego. Most people don't listen, they wait to speak. They mentally prepare their replies instead of absorbing what's being said. But when someone experiences true listening, it changes everything. Their guard lowers, their stress eases, their heart relaxes. Instead of asking for solutions, sometimes people just need space to talk. And if you can be that space, you become someone they rely on. Not because you know everything, but because you listen when others don't. That reliability builds loyalty, and loyalty builds influence. Influence that comes not from power or pressure, but from presence. The quiet presence of someone who listens makes more impact than any loud attempt to dominate conversation ever could. Listening also teaches you patience. It trains you to step back instead of rushing forward. It shows you that understanding is more valuable than proving your point. And the more you listen, the more self-control you develop. You learn to pause, you learn to observe, you learn to think before reacting. That emotional control makes you easier to trust. People trust those who don't lose themselves in every discussion. People trust those who can remain calm when others are heated. Listening develops that kind of calm, and calmness builds credibility. The world respects people who stay composed, not because they are silent forever, but because they know when to speak and when to simply listen. That balance between words and silence is what makes someone trustworthy. In leadership, listening is not just helpful, it's necessary. A leader who doesn't listen loses touch with reality. But a leader who listens understands the needs of their people. They can guide better, solve problems faster, and support more effectively. Employees, family members, friends, They all respond better to someone who listens. Listening shows care, it shows responsibility, it shows genuine investment in others. Advice only works when people feel understood first. That's why the most respected leaders aren't just great speakers, they're great listeners. They don't control the conversation, they guide it. They don't dominate the room, they connect with it. And that connection is what makes leadership real. The same applies to relationships. Arguments often escalate because no one is listening, only defending. But when one person truly listens without judgment, the tension breaks. The other